So Craig, we are here in the National Railway Museum as part of the People, Pride and Progress project that the NRM are running. The aim is to get a greater understanding of what LGBTQ plus experiences are like in the railway and how they've changed over time. So you've been in the railway over 20 years?
Yeah, that's right. Thank you for that. So I think in total it'll be about 26 years. So my very first experience started in around 1998.
Amazing. And what was that first day like back in 1998?
Oh, well, first of all, I didn't know I was going to be working in rail, so I responded to a job advert for a recruitment agency, went along to an interview for which was advertised as a call centre role. When I got there, I found out it would be for National Rail Inquiries. So I thought, I don't know anything about trains, wasn't a big fan of trains, had barely been on them. So I thought, I don't know if this is for me. However, I accepted the job and then started 3.5 to 4 weeks worth of training on timetables and fares manuals, which we used to use back in the day to answer customer queries. So my shift was a lovely sociable 9 p.m. until 2 a.m. and I used to work I used to work weekends, so I used to get a Friday and a Saturday off, which was really lucky, but I used to work every Sunday. Customers used to ring up, ask for connections and fares, and we have to look through these books, work out all the times, go back on the phone, give them the information, and then generally they'd say, what's the next one? So you'd have to go back to the book and do it all again.
Kind of talking through your journey so far then, so starting with National Rail Inquiries, where has your journey with rail taken you since then?
So I worked in rail inquiries for about a year, and then a role came up through the same agency, and that was for LNER at the time in their call centre, which was in Barronhouse in Newcastle. So I ended up joining there. We had more training on fares manuals and timetables, although we had a system at the time. We had a system called Tribute, and another one which was DOS based, where you could look up times and prices. So compared to looking through books, that was really high tech. But yeah, with my experience in rail inquiries, I was top of the class in training, looking at the doors and the doors, which were depart arrive when you had connections. We used to write those down and then fill them in for customer queries. So yeah, I went on to work there for about a year in inquiries, which was on floor 5 at the time in Barronhouse. Really enjoyed that, but then another job came up, another contact centre job outside of the rail industry in insurance. So I ended up leaving and joining the insurance industry, but that was quite short-lived.
And then you came back into the fold after that role?
I did, so feeling really old now, but then I wasn't happy in that industry. I didn't really enjoy it. It didn't have the same sort of feeling. It was very, very hard sales and less about the customer service. Because insurance is a necessity, isn't it? It's something that you kind of have to have. You have to have car insurance. You don't sort of choose to have it. So it's something that you're forced to have. So it was very, very different talking to people about car insurance than it was about a trip on the train. So I just didn't enjoy it. So I started to look at opportunities to get back into rail, and then on a Thursday evening in the Chronicle jobs section, which is how people found jobs back then, there was a part-time role at the travel centre in Newcastle station. So I applied for that, got an interview, and then subsequently got offered the job. So that was back into rail at Central Station, but this time in person in the travel centre.
And kind of from there, your career progressed with GNR and then onwards?
Yeah, absolutely. So I was at the travel centre, I think about 14 years altogether. So in that time, I'd seen quite a bit of change when franchise changed. I'd got offered my part-time contract became full-time, so I ended up going full-time. Really enjoyed the role, worked with lots of different people, and then kind of set me foot into training a little bit. So I would do a bit of training in the travel centre, and then a role came up in the contact centre, which was coming back in-house, and that was under Virgin, and I ended up getting a secondment as a trainer there. So did that for about a year, back to the travel centre for a bit. I got a secondment in an engagement team, and then got another secondment in the community engagement team, which was a brand new team at the time. In fact, I had that many secondments. I think people were joking and saying I'd get the secondment as the MD for my next role. So we did that for a while, and then that moved. We moved around into comms, and then in my current role, which I moved into last year, May last year, and that is in the people team as employee experience business partner and ED&I Lead.
And thinking of all those comments and how they've helped shape you and give you opportunities that you might not have had otherwise, do you have a particular favourite that you really enjoyed, that you feel really set you on the path that you're on now?
Oh, I think, to be honest, the very, very first step I took was that role at the CSC, the Customer Contact Centre, which was offered because I'd applied for a training role, was unsuccessul in that post. But I was told that there was another job coming up and it might be of interest if I wanted to apply for it. So when I saw this job coming up for the Customer Contact Centre, I thought, I haven't worked in a contact centre for nearly 15 years. All the systems will be different. I doubt they're using doors to give customers information, and I doubt they're looking for the Southeast Fares manual from a shelf. So I thought, I'm not sure if I've got the experience to do it. But my manager at the time, when I spoke to her about it, she said, Craig, I'll give you a piece of advice. She says, just wing it like many of us do and you'll be fine. So I've tried that, and that absolutely worked. And I learned on the job. It was a fantastic opportunity. Learned as I go, got to work with some fantastic people and learned a lot from them. And I think I could bring a lot of my experience from the travel centre into that role, but then also learn quite a lot of new knowledge and skills.
And kind of going back to those early days with GNER, how did you feel attitudes around LGBTQ people were back in the day?
Oh, well, I think probably my perception was that the rail industry wasn't a very open place. It was very stereotypical, sort of generations of people who worked in rail, very male dominated, and I didn't think it would be a place where you could openly be LGBTQ+. So back in the day when I very first started, you get those questions, have you got a girlfriend, are you married? And I didn't feel that I could say, no I haven't, I am gay. So I used to sometimes just pretend and say, oh yes, I've got a girlfriend, and kind of make up a name or use one of my female friends who I would hope they would never meet. And then when it came to do like a social occasion, a Christmas party, work drinks, that sort of thing, when people were bringing partners, we conveniently weren't speaking, or after a while we'd broken up. And because she hadn't shown up to any previous events, when we broke up it probably wasn't that much of a surprise. I thought I was getting away with it, but I probably wasn't.
And how did it feel to you having to almost live this lie, having to invent a relationship while trying to be your authentic self at work?
Yeah, it was really hard, because it takes a lot of energy to do that, and I used to dread those questions. I used to avoid the subject. If people were talking about partners or girlfriends or wives or husbands in the mess room, I'd sort of want to eat my lunch really quickly and just kind of exit the conversation, because I used to feel a bit sick to my stomach thinking, oh, it'll come to me, they'll ask me, and I'm going to have to lie or make an excuse. And it takes quite a lot to not talk about a part of your life at work. So yeah, a lot of energy goes into that, I think, more than you realise. And once you've told a lie or tried to keep something up, you've got to then try and keep it up. Another sort of problem with that as well is that if you tell a lie, and I learned this from Judge Judy, if you tell a lie, you've got to have a really good memory, because you've got to try and remember stuff that actually didn't happen. So trying to remember what you'd said, or what I'd said about Julie, or did I use the name Karen this time, or which friend did I use to which particular person in which scenario. What did I say we had an argument about when we'd never actually had one because this person didn't exist. It was really hard trying to remember all that stuff, so you inevitably do trip yourself up. And the more energy you're putting into doing that, the less energy you've got to put into other things, which is, you know, being your best self at work, because you can't really be your best self when you're not being your authentic self.
Absolutely. And speaking of authenticity, when was the first time during your career you saw someone living their authentic life as an LGBTQ person in the railway?
Oh, well, when I was at the travel centre, we did have a colleague there who was openly gay. And to me, that felt, and he was quite a lot older than me at the time. I think I was 22. And this chap was quite a bit older. But I didn't really feel sort of a sort of connection, because this gentleman, he's a lovely guy, and we kind of had that role as, or the funny gay at work, and people would sort of take the mick quite a bit and make sort of, looking back now, like very homophobic jokes, all in good jest and good banter, but they always made me feel a little bit uncomfortable, because I didn't really want my sexuality just to define who I was, and all of the jokes and all of the conversation be about that, because I think that's part of myself, but it isn't the thing I just wanted to talk about all of the time. So even though there was somebody else who was gay and out, I didn't really feel like we were similar. So it didn't feel like I had permission to then be myself, because I didn't see much of a similarity between us at the time.
And when did you start allowing yourself that permission to be your authentic self? Was there a moment that kind of changed the path for you, that you kind of felt you could bring your full self to work?
Yeah, so I ended up making some really good friends at the travel centre, and one couple were a lesbian couple. Who I didn't even realise at first. I just thought they were friends or flatmates. Like, they were in a different team, so I didn't get to work with them that much. But I ended up transferring teams, and we became friends. And I still wasn't out then, but I almost felt, and they were just the couple that seemed accepted by everybody. It wasn't a big thing that they just talked about all of the time. So I just found that really refreshing, because it wasn't like other people I had met. So we became firm friends, and then it was after maybe 3 or 4 months, I felt like I could come out to one of them, even though both of them, but me and one of the couple went to the gym, which was at the Central Station Hotel. We had a work discount there. We only used to go in the steam room, and then the swimming pool. And while we were in the swimming pool, I told this friend, and she already knew. She wasn't surprised, but it just felt like a huge weight off that I'd actually said it, because I think I was maybe nearly 23 then, and it was the first time I had ever said that out loud.
The first person at all that you'd ever spoken to about your sexuality?
Yeah, absolutely, first person. Like, I knew, but I'd never actually come out. So yeah, that was the first time.
And from that moment, did that start a bit of a domino effect, or was there still a bit of a pause before you kind of moved on to kind of be more open, wider with that?
I think it did. So I felt comfortable just that someone knew, or a couple of people knew, so I felt like at least around these people I didn't have to pretend or not be myself. But then what had happened is we went out, and I'd made some other friends outside of work, and went out on the gay scene one night, and then this older gentleman at work had seen us, and I started panicking, thinking, oh, now he knows. And when I'd went into work, and that was the weekend, so I think when I went into work the following week, I thought, oh, maybe he hasn't seen us, but he said to us straight away, I saw you in the gay bar, was that your boyfriend you were with? And I was like, oh no, I could feel myself going really red. And he said, oh, don't worry, I wouldn't tell anybody. But from then, like, kind of people started to hear, and the thing is, you know, you can't keep something like that secret for very long. So yeah, there were sort of whispers and rumours going around, and yeah, I think people were not surprised.
And did you find when those rumours were going around, was it best just to address them head on and try and destigmatise it, or were you still very much living under a bit of a feeling of suppression, guilt around that?
Yeah, kind of. I think I felt felt guilty because I hadn't been honest with people. So I felt, oh, it's been sort of a year now, and I haven't been honest with these people. So what they're going to think of is they're going to think I'm dishonest, I'm a liar. So I felt really awkward around that. But then because I'd made these sort of few close friends who knew, I felt like I had a safe space, but not a wider safe space. And a lot of colleagues who worked there were a good couple of generations older than me, and I kind of thought, how are they going to react? Because I didn't have a really great reaction in my personal life from family at the time when I sort of broached that conversation. So I thought, well, they're similar age, so they're going to act the same. So I was really worried about them finding out what we're talking about in front of them. However, what had happened is I'd kind of just kept under the radar for a while, and then on this one particular day I was at the travel centre. We used to have a tickets for a day section and a tickets in advance, so I was working on this tickets for a day section, and there was two sort of older male colleagues either side of us, and I had this customer who started to get a bit abusive over the cost of a ticket to Durham, which at the time was probably about 3 shillings. So he was having a go at us, and he used some homophobic slurs. And when he used them, he was really loud, and he shouted it really loudly. And I could see me two colleagues sort of look from either side of us, and I felt really embarrassed. I could feel myself going red and starting to sweat because I thought, well, what do I do? Like, I just wanted to exit the situation, I thought, because my reaction now is kind of confirming, because I couldn't say, well, I'm not, even though I wanted to, and then I felt like I was ambushed. But these two colleagues who were on either side, they both stood up and then said to the customer, you can't say that, that's completely unacceptable, and told him that he wouldn't be travelling, we wouldn't be selling them a ticket, and he needed to leave the travel centre because he couldn't speak to members of staff like that. So he then shouted and argued with them, and they said to me, go on, you get yourself out of the back. So I went out the back because I was visibly a bit upset, but they chased him off and then came to check on us and just sort of said, are you all right? And I was a bit overwhelmed, really. I felt really awkward, and I was like, oh yeah, I'm fine, like trying to sort of wipe the tears away. But yeah, that was a sort of bit of a defining moment for me, because these two colleagues who I thought, well, if they find out, or if they know for sure, they're probably not going to want anything to do with us, because, growing up all that, back in those days, you always think that, and a lot of people's experiences were like that. But yeah, that kind of allyship, as it were, I didn't know it was allyship then. I can look back and say it is allyship now. Did have a really profound effect, because I actually thought, they're saying I'm okay, like they're saying that I'm okay, and they've got me back, and that felt really liberating.
And kind of thinking of allyship as like a really great tool in order to show your support for your colleagues in the workplace, no matter kind of what part of themselves they're wanting to bring to work authentically, and being able to support people. Are there any other kind of tools or supports that we have nowadays that you wish you might have had back then that could have helped with making you feel more at ease and more comfortable?
Oh, just so many. I mean, there's so many initiatives such as colleague networks. We've got toolkits, we've got a gender identity toolkit, which we're really proud that we've launched last year in partnership with our colleague networks. We've got attendance at Pride. We've got initiatives like rainbow lanyards, and they might seem like small things, and people might think, well, why'd you do all of that? Because you don't need to. But actually thinking back, sort of, when I was my first experience in rail in 1998, or even 2001 when I joined the travel centre, if I saw somebody wearing a rainbow lanyard, I'd feel relieved. Like, I feel like that would give me permission to say, actually, I can be myself, because this person's not going to judge us. And in this business that incorporates these initiatives, is saying it's okay for you to work here, like, you're welcome. And I think it's just that visual piece, because I don't think, I don't know many, talking to friends who are straight, I've had conversations with them, and none of them have shared an experience where they've said, I feel really nervous going into work in case somebody finds out I'm straight. I'm going to feel really nervous that I'm not going to be welcome because somebody might find out I've got a wife or a husband. So it's very different when you feel like you're not going to be accepted. And back in those days, all the media, there wasn't many role models. There was Section 28, which was when I was in school, which prohibited the promotion of LGBTQ plus issues, or basically the conversation about LGBTQ plus identities. So there was never that permission to say, like, you're okay, you can just be you. So I think initiatives like this might seem really, really small, but I think it shows that support and that advocacy. And somebody, even now, not everybody has a really pleasant experience at home when they, when they come out or share that they're feeling a certain type of way. It might not be welcome news, but actually, if you come to work and your employer is showing that acceptance and initiative, like, it's somewhere you can have a safe space, and I think that makes all the difference to a lot of people.
Going back to the colleague, the older gentleman in the travel centre whose sexuality was kind of used as the butt of the jokes, when did you start to see that kind of culture shift where sexuality stopped being a bit of a joke for colleagues, and you started to feel like it was more of an open and safer space to just exist as you are?
Yeah, I think that's been a really gradual change. I think, looking back now, sort of 2001, 2002, with a 2024 lens, so many conversations and what would be passed off as banter just wouldn't be acceptable now, because, it's you can't say. It used to be the saying, didn't they, like, sticks and stones will break my bones, but names will never hurt me. But they absolutely do, and the words really do cut deep. And I think it's much better now that we're more mindful, and I think people do learn over time and are more educated. And back then, did I see some of these things as completely unacceptable, or did they make us feel uncomfortable? Yes, they did, but I didn't think that could be classed as discrimination or discriminatory behaviour or anything like that. I just didn't really know that there was that protection in place. But I think certainly, the Equality Act and the fact that media is changed and is more reflective and representative, I think the culture's definitely growing, and employers make that effort now to be inclusive, which I think is really important, and not just for LGBTQ plus identities, but for all identities and people from all backgrounds, so that everybody is able to bring themselves to work. And I think that's why initiatives like this are so important, because they just, people, if they can come to work and be themselves, they're going to do a better job, and that's good for the individual. It's also good for the business and good for society.
Absolutely, no, definitely. Do you remember when you saw your first rainbow lanyards in the workplace, when they were brought in, and kind of how the impact of that was felt across the business?
Yeah, absolutely. They came in when I was in the community team. I think it was one of the initiatives, because we used to work alongside the D&I manager then, and it was colleagues asking us, and I think they'd seen them in other businesses, and started emailing saying, can we get a rainbow lanyard? Can we get a rainbow lanyard? And I remember at the time thinking, no, do we need a rainbow lanyard? Do we need them? But when they came in and started rolling out, the amount of people that asked for them was just amazing. And does everybody wear them because they're fully an advocate for LGBTQ plus rights? Maybe not. Maybe some people just wear them because they like the lanyard. But also, you're not going to wear a lanyard like that if you are against LGBTQ plus identities. So I think just that small visual advocacy, that allyship, that permission is a really positive thing, because it just gives people that permission to just be themselves. And I think if you come into a job interview and you see that the employer is wearing a lanyard like that, I think you can just breathe a little sigh of relief and think, actually, it's okay, I don't have to pretend that I've got a girlfriend named Julie or Karen and we've had an argument.
Absolutely. No, that's great to hear, the kind of the way that's transformed and progressed. So I guess kind of looking back on those 25, 26 years you've had here so far, and looking now forward at what might kind of the future holds for LGBTQ people in the workplace, What do you think might be some of the big significant changes we might see in future years that kind of help people still feel even more comfortable, those who might not currently feel they can be their authentic selves? Where do you see that going?
I think there's loads to do. I think we've come such a long way, and I think a key driver is mechanisms like colleague networks, because I think colleague networks really drive initiatives. And you know, in our business, like in many businesses, they're across all areas, and they're not just from one department or one location, and they really are the voices and the ears on the ground. They see what's going on, they identify areas where things need to change or where we could do better, and that gives them that mechanism and forum to feed that back. And I think it's initiatives like this, like the Gender Identity Toolkit, like the Rainbow Lanyards, down to helping direct what we do with Pride. It's colleague-led, and I think if colleagues really, they share their experience, they identify what needs to be done and what can be better, and then the business supports them to be able to do it. So whereas, for example, now in my role as an ED&I Lead, I don't know everything that's going on across the business, across all different colleague experiences. I can't identify, I wish I could, like it would just be amazing to put on my CV, every single issue, every single area of improvement. So we rely on those networks to share that and say, hey, this is happening here, or this is not happening here. How can we make this better? And they come forward with ideas. So I think colleague networks for all businesses are so important, and they really help forward drive that inclusive journey.
So thinking back to young Craig, when you very first started here, did you ever think you might end up in your current role as an Equality, Diversity and Inclusion Lead? Did that ever feel like a potential that you might explore?
Never, not at all. I think back in those days, when I was looking through those timetables, looking through the FAIRS manuals, doing the da-da-das, never ever did I think that there'd even be a role such as an ED&I, Equality, Diversity, Inclusion Lead. I just didn't think that existed or would ever exist. So yeah, I think it's, the rail industry for me, I've got so much to be grateful for, because it's really helped me with that professional development, and I've been able to go into multiple roles, which many of my colleagues I know have, and people across the business. It gives that real opportunity for movement and progression, but also with that personal growth as well, because I've met so many people along the way and continue to meet and work with people who I can learn from, and people who share experiences that I've never had and I don't experience. It's really valuable to hear that from colleagues, and I think the business is now getting so much better at giving those platforms for colleagues. And I think if colleagues are able to come to work and just talk about their life, which you think you would just take for granted as a thing that everyone should be able to do, but not everybody can. So I think that real journey that we're on at the moment is just saying that everybody is welcome, and actually, through little things like newsletters, if you hear a colleague's story and somebody might be talking about the relationship and they identify as LGBTQ+, like if I'd seen a colleague newsletter in 1998 and there was a guy talking about his husband, or we had a woman talking about a wife, like I would have been bowled over. I would have thought, wow, like what an amazing thing, or how brave they are to be able to do that. Whereas now, that just happens and people do that a lot more. So I think it's fantastic, and I think as much as people might think, oh well, that's nothing, we don't need to we don't need to worry about that now because everybody's just accepting. There's going to be people still today, we know for a fact that there's people still today who aren't having a great experience, and actually for them to see that, for them to see somebody who's like them and that they can identify with and just not feel alone, I think that's a really positive thing. So I think, for me, it's all in the colleagues, like it's people power.
And for a young colleague starting today who, like you say, might not be fully out and fully comfortable, is there any advice you would give to somebody who might be feeling like they want to bring their authentic self to work but can't necessarily? Is there advice in your current role or from your story so far that you feel you could help them with?
Yeah, absolutely. I would just say it's not going to be as scary as you think it is. I think the very hardest, toughest part is telling yourself. and accepting it yourself. And once you've done that and made peace with that, the next step is just sharing it with others. And I can say, hand on heart, in this rail industry, I have never experienced, even though all the way back to 1998, I've never experienced hostility, somebody who's actively been hostile. I think it's always been my perception that people would act that way, but it's never actually been reality. Now, that's not to say that everybody's perfect and everybody's going to embrace you, but actually, we're in a workplace and we're an employer that champions equality, diversity, inclusion, and if you hold views that don't align with the values of the business, then you're probably not going to get a job here. You're probably not going to be welcome. So I would say, tell someone who you feel safe with, your manager, a colleague, just unload that. And then that's the first step, and it really does become easier after then.
Well, thank you so much for your time, Craig, and thank you so much for all the work you've put in and sharing your story today.
Thank you, Kris. It's been a pleasure.